Food is more than just survival. It's memory, culture, and identity. Every recipe carries the fingerprints of the people who created it, a story simmered into each pot and baked into every loaf. Yet some of the most remarkable food traditions in America have almost slipped away. Long before supermarkets and fast food, native communities crafted dishes that were ingenious, nourishing, and deeply tied to the land. Imagine roasted corn cakes wrapped in husks, smoky stews bubbling in clay pots, or sweet berry puddings shared at summer gatherings. These weren't just meals, they were moments of connection, binding generations together. But as time passed, many of these recipes faded, overshadowed by colonization, migration, and industrial food. Today, what was once common is now strange, almost forgotten. In this journey, we'll rediscover 25 Native American recipes, ancient flavors passed down for centuries, carrying whispers of history with every bite. Food has always been a carrier of memory. One bite of cornbread, one sip of smoky stew, and suddenly you're transported back to a grandmother's kitchen or a summer feast by the river. Yet, these memories are fragile. Over time, even the most beloved dishes can fade into obscurity. Why does this happen? Part of the answer lies in psychology. Human memory is selective. We tend to hold on to big events and let everyday details slip away. Meals, once ordinary, get pushed aside in favor of new tastes and new rituals. What was once the centerpiece of a community gathering becomes a faint shadow. Cultural shifts deepen the loss. Migration scattered families, breaking the chain of oral tradition that once preserved recipes. Industrialization sped up the process. Canned goods, boxed meals, and fast food began to replace slow, communal cooking. There's also the pull of modern identity. Younger generations often seek convenience, global flavors, or trendy health foods, sometimes seeing traditional recipes as old-fashioned. A dish like acorn bread, once a proud symbol of resourcefulness, might feel irrelevant compared to a store-bought loaf. This creates a stark contrast. Foods that were once central to survival now appear exotic or even strange. Imagine a time when venison stew thickened with wild grains was daily fare. Today it might only appear in museums, cookbooks, or reenactments. When food memories fade, something deeper is lost. Recipes, they carry wisdom about the land, the seasons, and the ways people once lived in harmony with nature. Without them, it's not just flavors that disappear, but stories, skills, and identity itself. And yet, the embers of these traditions still glow. Some recipes survive in fragments, through a grandmother's tale, a tribe's festival, or a chef reviving forgotten flavors. They remind us that memory may fade, but it can also be rekindled. By revisiting these lost foods, we're not just tasting history. We're reclaiming understand the sandwiches that once defined Southern life. We first need to step back into the kitchens and communities that shaped them. Southern food is not just about flavor. It's about history, struggle, and resilience. Every dish tells a layered story of migration, survival, and cultural blending. At its heart, Southern food is a patchwork of influences. Native American communities first shaped the land's foodways, introducing staples like corn, beans, squash, and wild game. These weren't just ingredients. They were philosophies of eating, rooted in seasonality and respect for the earth. Later, African American cooks brought knowledge of okra, yams, rice dishes, and bold spice traditions, transforming humble ingredients into deeply flavorful meals. European immigrants, from the British to the French, Spanish, and Germans, added breads, cured meats, cheeses, and pickling techniques. Together, these influences created a cuisine as rich and complex as the South itself. Sandwiches became a natural extension of this culinary mosaic. They were practical, portable, and affordable. A farm worker might pack leftover fried chicken between biscuits. A church lady might spread pimento cheese between slices of white bread for a Sunday picnic. A railway passenger might grab a hot ham sandwich at a small-town diner before the next train rolled in. These weren't luxury foods. They were everyday comfort, stitched into the rhythm of life. Southern sandwiches also carried social meaning. Food was community, and the South had plenty of spaces where sandwiches became symbols of togetherness. At church gatherings, picnic tables would groan under platters of homemade loaves stuffed with cold cuts, pickles, and spreads. At fish fries or harvest festivals, sandwiches filled with fried catfish or barbecue pork told stories of shared labor and celebration. Even in the leanest years of the Great Depression, a simple tomato and mayonnaise sandwich could spark joy, offering a taste of summer sunshine on the darkest of days. These sandwiches reflected the South's identity, resourceful, inventive, and proud of tradition. But they also mirrored change. As cities grew and industrial food became more common, new bread factories replaced salt-rising loaves. Packaged lunch meats replaced smoked hams cured in a backyard smokehouse. By mid-century, fast food chains were rewriting the menu, pushing homemade sandwiches out of the spotlight. Still, the cultural imprint remained. Sandwiches weren't just meals, they were acts of memory. They carried flavors of ancestry and geography. Gulf shrimp tucked into rolls, Appalachian ramps fried up with eggs, Delta catfish fried crisp and golden. Each bite told you where you were and who you came from. The heritage of Southern food, then, is not just about recipes. It's about resilience, about how people adapted to what they had, turned scarcity into creativity, and passed traditions through generations. These lost sandwiches belong to that heritage. They are culinary snapshots of a South that was slower, more intimate, and deeply tied to the land. Remembering them isn't just nostalgia, it's cultural preservation. To forget these foods is to forget part of the South's story, and by extension, part of America's. They remind us that food is not just fuel, it's memory, history, and identity, all tucked between two slices of bread. The early to mid-20th century was the true golden age of Southern sandwiches. This was the era when home kitchens, roadside diners, and bustling railway cafes all celebrated the sandwich as both a humble necessity and a symbol of Southern pride. To eat one was to taste a culture in motion, one that honored tradition while embracing the modern world. In those decades, sandwiches were everywhere. On farms, they fueled long hours in the fields. Workers would pack thick slices of cornbread stuffed with cold fried pork or cheese, wrapped in wax paper for the day's labor. In towns, drugstore counters and lunch wagons turned out hot ham sandwiches, barbecue buns, and fried fish fillets served between slices of soft white bread. And in churches, ladies' auxiliaries perfected spreads like pimento cheese and deviled ham, layered neatly into dainty triangles for Sunday socials and fundraising suppers. But what made this the golden era wasn't just abundance, it was creativity. These sandwiches carried the ingenuity of a region learning to stretch its resources while still creating something delicious. Leftover fried chicken found new life tucked into biscuits. Salt-cured country ham was shaved thin, its saltiness softened by a smear of butter or mustard. Farmers smoked pork shoulders and shredded them into sandwiches that would one day evolve into iconic barbecue. Even tomatoes and mayonnaise on cheap sliced bread became a summer delicacy, celebrated for their freshness and simplicity. It was also an era when regional differences were clear and proud. Along the Gulf Coast, shrimp po' boys burst with fried seafood, crisp lettuce, and tangy remoulade. In Kentucky, the hot brown was invented, a decadent open-faced sandwich covered in turkey, bacon, and Mornay sauce. In Tennessee, country ham biscuits reigned supreme, often sold at fairs and train depots. These weren't just sandwiches, they were edible passports, telling you exactly where you stood on the Southern map. What's striking today is how normal these foods once were. A ham biscuit at a gas station wasn't exotic, it was expected. A fried bologna sandwich wasn't a novelty, it was a quick lunch. Sandwiches connected generations, from schoolchildren unwrapping paper lunches to travelers finding comfort in a familiar taste hundreds of miles from home. The golden era also coincided with the rise of Southern hospitality as a cultural identity. Offering someone a sandwich wasn't just feeding them, it was welcoming them, showing pride in local flavors, and sharing in the region's abundance. Food was friendship, and sandwiches, easy to prepare, easy to share, became the perfect symbol of that warmth. Today, looking back, we realize these sandwiches weren't just recipes. They were markers of a moment in time when the South was proud of its food, resourceful with its ingredients, and endlessly inventive in its kitchens. What was once common is now strange, even exotic, as many of these creations have vanished from daily life. Yet during their golden era, they weren't relics. They were the heart of the Southern table. Every golden age eventually ends, and Southern sandwiches were no exception. The flavors that once filled farmhouses, lunch counters, and train depots began to vanish, not all at once, but gradually, as the tides of culture, industry, and migration swept through the South. What was once ordinary became old-fashioned. What was once beloved became forgotten. The first great shift came with industrial food production. By the mid-20th century, America was in love with speed and convenience. Factories churned out pre-sliced sandwich bread, processed cheese, canned meats, and spreads that required no preparation. Suddenly, the careful labor of baking cornbread or smoking a pork shoulder seemed unnecessary when you could buy a loaf of Wonder Bread and a pack of bologna in minutes. Mass production made food more affordable, but it also flattened regional variety. A ham biscuit in Kentucky no longer stood apart when a ham and cheese on factory bread looked the same from Miami to Seattle. Then came migration. Millions of Southerners left rural communities for cities, seeking factory jobs or military service. They carried memories of fried chicken biscuits and tomato sandwiches with them, but in new environments, convenience often won. City delis and cafeterias didn't stock country ham or homemade pickles. They offered club sandwiches and BLTs instead. Over time, children raised in these new surroundings associated lunch not with pimento cheese or po' boys, but with peanut butter and jelly or turkey on white. Slowly, cultural inheritance broke. Changing tastes played their role as well. With post-war prosperity came an appetite for the modern and the glamorous. Cookbooks and advertisements celebrated Jell-O molds, Spam loaves, and scientific nutrition, leaving old-fashioned spreads like deviled ham or pickle and egg sandwiches looking dated. To the younger generation, what their grandparents ate felt embarrassingly plain. Sandwiches like fried bologna, once prized for thrift and comfort, became symbols of poverty. Aspiration shifted to new foods, airline chicken, frozen dinners, international flavors. In the pursuit of progress, the humble brilliance of the Southern sandwich was sidelined. Another reason lies in the erosion of community spaces. Church socials, train depots, and corner lunch counters had once been stages where Southern sandwiches thrived. But as rail travel declined, diners closed, and fast food chains spread across the highways, the culture of gathering over a handmade sandwich began to fade. A McDonald's hamburger replaced the fried fish on white bread. A Subway footlong stood in for the shrimp po' boy. Standardization spread, and the messy, soulful personality of regional sandwiches was smoothed away. Ironically, even Southern pride sometimes worked against tradition. As the South sought to reinvent itself in the late 20th century, it often emphasized barbecue, fried chicken, and biscuits as its culinary ambassadors. Sandwiches, except for the most iconic few, fell into the background. The South marketed itself as a place of big meals and dramatic flavors, while the everyday sandwiches of farm life and church kitchens slipped quietly into obscurity. Yet the most powerful reason these foods disappeared might be forgetting itself. Recipes passed through hands, not books. A grandmother showed her granddaughter how to mash pimento cheese or soak country ham. But if that granddaughter moved away, if she preferred fast food, or if the family recipe never got written down, the tradition simply ended. Unlike fine French cuisine, Southern sandwiches were rarely codified. They lived in memories, and when those memories faded, so did the food. Today, when we look back, we feel a pang of irony. The very traits that once made these sandwiches ordinary, cheap ingredients, humble settings, regional quirks, are the reasons they became forgotten. What was once survival food became nostalgia. What was once a badge of identity became a curiosity. But if you dig beneath the surface, the story isn't just about food. It's about identity. Losing these sandwiches meant losing a piece of what made communities unique. To sit down with a fried green tomato sandwich in Alabama or a country ham biscuit in Tennessee was to eat history, to taste belonging. When those sandwiches disappeared, so too did part of the story Southerners told about themselves. In the end, Southern sandwiches didn't vanish because they weren't delicious. They vanished because the world around them changed faster than tradition could hold. And so, recipes that once held families and towns together slipped away, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day they were no longer expected, no longer common. What was once daily bread became a forgotten feast. Among all the sandwiches that once defined Southern tables, few are as deceptively simple and as deeply symbolic as the tomato sandwich. At first glance, it hardly looks like a recipe at all, just slices of fresh summer tomato, mayonnaise, and soft white bread. But to those who grew up in the South, this sandwich is not just food. It's a memory, a season, a ritual. The tomato sandwich thrives on one condition. The tomato must be ripe, sun-warmed, and bursting with juice. In an era before grocery stores stocked year-round produce, tomatoes were a fleeting summer luxury. Families waited for them with anticipation, gathering them from backyard gardens or roadside stands. To bite into a tomato sandwich was to taste July itself, hot afternoons, buzzing cicadas, and the sweetness of homegrown abundance. Culturally, this sandwich symbolized resourcefulness and humility. It required no meat, no cheese, no complicated preparation, just what the garden gave and what the pantry held. For working-class families, especially in rural areas, it offered a cheap but satisfying meal. The mayonnaise, often Duke's in the South, added richness. The bread softened under the tomatoes' juices, creating a messy, almost tender texture. This was food meant to be eaten quickly at the counter or wrapped in wax paper for a field lunch, not displayed for prestige. Psychologically, the tomato sandwich represented a comforting connection to place. It reminded Southerners of where they came from, of the land that fed them, of grandparents who planted and harvested. To eat one was to participate in a shared memory across generations. That's why, even today, Southerners often speak of tomato sandwiches with a nostalgia bordering on reverence. But as tastes modernized, the tomato sandwich began to fade. Out-of-season tomatoes lacked the same flavor. Industrial bread felt flabby compared to artisanal loaves. Diet culture dismissed mayonnaise as unhealthy. To younger eaters, the sandwich could seem too plain, too poor. What was once everyday sustenance became a seasonal curiosity. Yet the tomato sandwich endures as a symbol of Southern identity. Food writers and chefs, to eat one now is almost an act of resistance against complexity, a reminder that some of the best food is also the most humble. In its juiciness, its mess, its fleeting perfection, the tomato sandwich captures what Southern food has always been, a marriage of land, memory, and survival. If the tomato sandwich was the taste of summer gardens, then the pimento cheese sandwich was the taste of Southern hospitality. Known fondly as the caviar of the South, pimento cheese was more than just a spread, it was a cultural phenomenon. Made with grated cheddar, mayonnaise, and sweet red pimentos, this humble mixture found its way between two slices of bread, onto crackers, or into celery sticks. But in its sandwich form, it became one of the most beloved staples of the Southern lunch table. Combined with cheddar and mayo, a trio of affordable, readily available ingredients, it blossomed into a spread that crossed class lines. It was equally at home in church picnics, lunchboxes, and tea parties. The sandwich represented versatility and inclusivity, something everyone could enjoy. In the South, pimento cheese sandwiches became inseparable from community gatherings. They were the sandwiches wrapped in wax paper for long train rides, the finger foods served at weddings, the comfort bites after funerals. They offered creamy sharpness, a hint of sweetness, and just enough spice, a flavor profile both bold and familiar. For many Southerners, pimento cheese was tied to their earliest food memories, the taste of childhood summers and church socials. But like many regional foods, its popularity began to wane in the latter half of the 20th century. Industrial food production altered its character. Mass-market versions were bland, heavy, and overly processed. Supermarkets stocked, to younger generations, the sandwich seemed old-fashioned, overshadowed by fast food burgers and trendy deli fare. What was once a proud Southern icon slowly slipped into the category of grandma's food. Still, the pimento cheese sandwich has never truly disappeared. In recent years, chefs across the South have revived it, adding modern twists, jalapenos, artisanal cheeses, even bacon. At the Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia, the pimento cheese sandwich remains a legendary concession, proof of its enduring cultural power. Ultimately, the pimento cheese sandwich is more than a bite of nostalgia. It represents the Southern art of making much from little, of transforming pantry staples into something iconic. To taste one today is to taste a century of community, ingenuity, and pride. Few sandwiches carry as much cultural mythology as the peanut butter and banana sandwich, forever tied to the memory of Elvis Presley. While peanut butter had already been a staple in American pantries by the 1930s, it was the king of rock and roll who elevated this humble pairing into legend. In the South, where peanut farming thrived and bananas became affordable imports, this sandwich found its home as a sweet, hearty, and deeply satisfying bite. The sandwich itself was simple: creamy peanut butter spread thick on warm white bread, layered with ripe banana slices, and sometimes fried in butter until golden and gooey. It was equal parts indulgent and comforting, soft, sticky, and sweet, with just enough protein-packed richness to keep someone going through a long day. For many Southerners, it became a childhood favorite, the kind of snack a grandmother or mother would make after school. Elvis adored this sandwich so much that it became inseparable from his public persona. Stories spread of him enjoying late-night feasts of peanut butter and banana sandwiches, sometimes with bacon or honey added for extra decadence. Restaurants in Memphis and beyond quickly capitalized on this connection, cementing the sandwich as a piece of pop culture folklore. To eat one wasn't just to enjoy a sandwich, it was to taste a little slice of Southern rock and roll history. Yet, despite its fame, the peanut butter and banana sandwich has faded from everyday Southern kitchens. Part of this decline is generational. Younger people often reach for Nutella, protein bars, or smoothies instead of old-fashioned peanut butter concoctions. Bananas, once exotic and special, are now taken for granted. And in an era of health-conscious eating, a butter-fried peanut butter sandwich might feel too heavy or indulgent for regular meals. Still, for those who grew up with it, the peanut butter and banana sandwich is more than food, it's memory. It's sitting on a porch swing on a humid afternoon, banana slices sticking to the roof of your mouth. It's hearing Elvis croon from a record player while the smell of frying butter fills the kitchen. It's the kind of food that connects generations, even if only through stories. Today, some chefs have rediscovered it, transforming it into gourmet creations with toasted brioche, caramelized bananas, and artisanal nut butters. But at its heart, the sandwich remains simple, proof that sometimes the sweetest Southern traditions are born from the simplest combinations. Before tuna salad took over Southern lunchboxes, there was the sardine and mustard sandwich. Cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with protein, it was once a humble but dependable meal across working-class Southern communities. Sardines came in little tins, easy to store, easy to transport, and surprisingly versatile. For mill workers, farmers, and even railway laborers, this was a sandwich that filled you up without draining your pocket. The preparation was simple: a tin of sardines mashed with yellow mustard, sometimes brightened with a splash of vinegar or a sprinkle of chopped onion, then spread onto soft white bread or saltine crackers. Some added lettuce or sliced pickles for crunch, while others ate it plain and oily, the sharp bite of mustard cutting through the rich fishiness. It wasn't fancy, but it was real food, salty, tangy, and satisfying in its own rugged way. This sandwich thrived in an era when convenience foods meant canned goods, not drive-thrus. A family could stock sardines in their pantry for months, pull them out when money was tight, and have an instant meal. During the Depression years, and even into the 1950s, sardines were common on Southern tables, often eaten with cornbread, rice, or tucked into sandwiches like this one. So why did the sardine and mustard sandwich disappear? Several reasons. First, changing tastes. Younger generations found sardines too strong or fishy, compared to milder options like tuna. Second, the rise of fast food and prepackaged lunches offered cleaner, more uniform flavors. And third, cultural stigma. What was once practical began to feel poor or old-fashioned, and many families quietly abandoned it. By the 1980s, canned sardines had all but vanished from school lunchboxes. Still, the sardine and mustard sandwich carries a powerful nostalgia for some Southerners. It recalls factory lunch breaks with a brown paper sack, or a grandfather cracking open a tin at the kitchen table, mustard jar always nearby. It's a food memory rooted not in indulgence, but in survival and resourcefulness, a reminder of how people made do with what they had. Interestingly, sardines are now making a comeback among health-conscious eaters, praised for their omega-3s and sustainability. Some Southern chefs are even reimagining the old sandwich with artisanal mustards, sourdough bread, and high-quality imported sardines. What was once a poor man's lunch might just become a retro delicacy. Every dish we've explored tells more than just the story of food. It tells the story of people. These forgotten Native American and Southern recipes are not simply curiosities from the past. They are fragments of identity, survival, and adaptation. They remind us that the meals once considered ordinary were in fact extraordinary acts of resilience, shaped by migration, scarcity, and creativity. What stands out is the contrast between past and present. Foods like succotash, ash cakes, or the sardine and mustard sandwich were once daily staples. Today, they feel unusual, even exotic, to modern palates accustomed to fast food and processed flavors. What was once common is now strange. That shift itself is part of history, a reflection of how culture evolves and forgets. But these recipes are not gone forever. Every time someone digs out an old community cookbook, asks a grandparent how they used to cook, or decides to try frying rabbit instead of buying chicken nuggets, memory is revived. Food is a bridge. It connects us to those who came before and gives us a tangible way to keep their lives present in our own. So the next time you sit down at your table, remember, recipes are more than instructions. They're heirlooms. They carry stories of survival, struggle, celebration, and change. By cooking and sharing them, we ensure that these voices from the past are never silenced, and that history remains alive, one forgotten meal at a time. They carry stories of survival, struggle, celebration, and change. By cooking and sharing them, we ensure that these voices from the past are never silenced, and that history remains alive, one forgotten meal at a time. By cooking and sharing them, we ensure that these voices from the past are never silenced, and that history remains alive, one forgotten meal at a time.